We met in the fall of 1991, back when things felt simpler and love came without terms and conditions. I was 33 then, managing maintenance at a paper mill in Spokane, Washington. She was a bank teller named Linda, the kind of woman who made every room feel warmer just by walking in. I remember the first time I saw her. She was helping an elderly couple who'd forgotten their PIN. Her voice calm and reassuring, her smile steady. Something about her felt grounded, real. We weren't young lovers caught in a whirlwind romance. Ours was a slow build, like laying bricks on a strong foundation. I asked her out after our fourth encounter at the bank, and we went to a Sunday morning farmer's market, coffee in hand, talking about family, faith, and how much we both missed when people mailed handwritten letters. Our first kiss didn't come until the third date, sitting on the back porch of her modest rental house, sipping iced tea and listening to cicadas. By the time we got married 2 years later, we'd already seen each other through job changes, a surgery on my left knee, and the death of her dog Toby, who had been with her since college. That's what built our trust, not just time, but the kind of trials that show who you are when life gets hard. We weren't glamorous, but we were solid. After our wedding, in a small chapel outside Coeur d'Alene, 40 guests and a potluck reception, we settled into a quiet rhythm. I still remember Linda's vows. She said, "I choose you every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She meant it, or at least I believed she did. We bought a modest single-story home on the edge of town. It had a wrapped porch and a fireplace we'd light up every winter. She painted the kitchen yellow because her grandmother always said yellow made food taste better. I built her a small greenhouse in the backyard so she could grow cherry tomatoes, and she'd leave them in vases all around the house. And sometimes I'd come home to find a note beside one that simply said, "Thinking of you." We had our son Ethan, 3 years in. Linda became a stay-at-home mom, a decision we made together after a long conversation on that same back porch. I was making decent money by then, shift supervisor, and she felt called to give Ethan the kind of slow, present childhood we both had growing up. Every night, we read to him from the same stack of children's books. Every Saturday, we took him to the park to feed the ducks. The thing about those early years is we were a team. It wasn't romantic in a candlelit movie scene way. It was better. It was small acts of loyalty, her keeping dinner warm when I worked overtime, me warming up her car on frosty mornings. We shared a bank account, passwords, fears, and dreams. There was no mine or hers. It was ours. Even now, I remember the sound of her laugh when she'd watch those old reruns of The Golden Girls. I can still hear the way she used to hum while folding laundry. The same tune every time. Moon River. We had our arguments. Sure. About money. About my mother visiting too often. About her habit of leaving the porch light on all night. But nothing that ever shook the bedrock of what we had. At some point, I stopped worrying about losing her. That's the danger of stability. It feels eternal, so you stop checking for cracks. I believed we'd grow old sitting on that porch, watching Ethan bring his own kids over for Sunday lunch. I truly thought we'd made it. We weren't perfect, but we were good. We were steady. We were a team. Looking back, that was the last time I felt truly safe with someone, before things began to change. Subtly at first. A late text here, a cold shoulder there, but I'll get to that. For now, I want you to understand something. This didn't start with bitterness. It started with love. Deep, familiar, everyday love. The kind of love you don't question until you're forced to. And I was forced to. We had just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary. Nothing grand. Just a quiet dinner at a small steakhouse off Route 195. Linda wore the same navy dress she'd worn on our 10th, said it still made her feel lucky. I brought her daisies, the same flowers she carried down the aisle. We talked about retirement, Ethan starting grad school in the fall, maybe driving up the Oregon coast in the summer. It felt, for all intents and purposes, like the life we'd built was still intact, weathered, but holding strong. The following week, on a crisp Thursday morning in late October, everything changed. It began innocuously enough. I'd forgotten my thermos in Linda's SUV. The night before, she'd taken it to visit her friend Darlene, who lived out by Meadowbrook Lake. I was heading to the shop early to help with a busted conveyor line, and figured I'd grab it before leaving. Her keys were still in her purse by the kitchen counter. She was in the shower. As I opened the backseat door, there it was. Her phone, sitting on the console, screen lit, open to a message thread. Now, I never went looking for trouble in our marriage, but that morning, something stopped me. Gut instinct. maybe, or God himself, tapping on my shoulder. The message preview read, "Last night was electric. Can't stop thinking about your lips." I wish I could say I put the phone down, that I trusted her enough to let it go. But after almost 3 decades together, that message hit me like a freight train. I tapped into the thread, and what I saw gutted me. There were photos. One, in particular, is burned into my memory. Linda, my wife, the mother of my son, the woman who used to sing to herself while making blueberry pancakes, was sitting on a park bench downtown, next to a man I didn't recognize. She was kissing him, not a quick peck, not a friendly gesture, a kiss that lingered. One hand on his chest, his hand resting on her thigh. There were messages to flirtations, nicknames, innuendos. She called him E, said he made her feel seen again. There was even talk of opening the door, phrase, I guessed, for bringing their connection into the open. I stood there, numb, in the cold garage air, thermos forgotten, hands trembling. The woman I had shared a life with for nearly 3 decades was sharing something sacred with someone else, and had been, it seemed, for weeks. When she came down dressed and ready for her day, I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. My voice would have cracked, and I refused to let her see me shattered. Instead, I waited until that night. We were sitting at the dining table. I'd poured myself a bourbon neat, no ice, and placed her phone, unlocked, in front of her. She looked at it, then looked at me. Double quotes, "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice tight. "I showed you proof," I said, my voice flat, "and you're asking me how I got it." There was a long pause. She looked away, eyes blinking too fast. "It was just a kiss," she finally said. "We were in public, in full view of everyone. It's not like we did anything private." "That's your defense," I said, trying to keep my voice from rising. "That because it was visible, it doesn't count. That you didn't sleep with him yet, so I'm overreacting." She didn't answer, just crossed her arms, defensive. "You didn't even tell me his name," I continued. "You want me to believe this was innocent, but you've already made choices behind my back. You shared parts of yourself that were supposed to be mine." Linda looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. "I didn't sleep with him, George. I swear. I don't know. I needed something different." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Linda?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What is it?" She didn't respond. She reached for her wineglass instead. That silence was louder than any confession. In the days that followed, she tried to normalize things, offering to make breakfast, folding my clothes, humming while she cooked dinner. But the spell was broken. Every movement, every word, felt rehearsed, like she was auditioning for forgiveness without truly understanding the role. And I couldn't shake the image of her with that man. The kiss, the messages, the casual betrayal of something I thought we both protected. It wasn't about just a kiss. It was about what the kiss represented. Because here's the thing. When someone you trust implicitly breaks that trust even slightly, it doesn't snap like a twig. It splinters all the way down. Every past conversation, every laugh, every silent moment of peace becomes suspect. I lay awake most nights after that, not crying, not raging, just hollow. I'd roll over and see her sleeping peacefully, unaware, maybe unbothered by the wreckage she'd set in motion. She offered explanations, but never apologies. She claimed I was too rigid, too old-fashioned, too unwilling to grow with her. I reminded her I'd followed her to 3 different towns for her jobs, supported her every career shift, and had always put family first. But none of that seemed to matter now. The truth was, she had changed the rules without telling me. We were playing a different game. And so, I began pulling away. Quietly, intentionally. I moved some of my things into the guest room. I started spending more time at the hardware store on Saturdays, lingering over tools I didn't need. I called Ethan more often just to hear his voice, to ground myself in someone I knew I hadn't lost yet. I started preparing for something. I never thought I'd have to face life without Linda. Not because I wanted to, but because she had already started living without me. I didn't yell. I didn't hit walls. I didn't sleep with someone else to get even. I simply watched the version of love I had known for 3 decades collapse under the weight of a single kiss and everything it revealed. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't start with a lie. It starts with a choice. And once that choice is made, there's no going back to before. But what came next? That's where things got even darker. And it was only the beginning. That night, after she said it was just a kiss, I couldn't sleep. But Linda went to bed, as if the air hadn't just been sucked out of the room. She turned on her side, pulled the comforter up to her chin, like she had every night for the last 27 years, and drifted off. I sat in the living room, lights off, bourbon glass in hand, staring at the family pictures on the mantel, vacations in Yellowstone, Christmas in 2005, Ethan's graduation. All those smiles now felt like scenes from a movie I didn't remember. Filming. By 2 a.m., I still hadn't moved. My mind was racing but empty at the same time. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. That kind of numb that comes right after you hear a doctor say the word cancer, or when the call comes that someone you love is gone. It was grief, but the person wasn't dead. Just ... absent in a way that was even harder to explain. The next morning, I brewed coffee like usual, 2 mugs hers, with a splash of hazelnut creamer. Routine was muscle memory. She came down wearing her usual light blue robe, offered me a half smile, and sat at the table like nothing had happened. That was the moment I realized something bone deep. She wasn't sorry. She was sorry I knew. Didn't say anything at first. I handed her the second photo I'd printed, this one of her laughing, hand resting comfortably on the same man's shoulder. The way she used to lean into me at barbecues. She stared at it, lips slightly parted, then back at me. George, she said, slowly, where are you getting these? I looked her in the eye. Does it matter? She fumbled. I just want to know how private moments ended up in your hands. I didn't blink. Knowing how I found out doesn't change the fact that you did it, Linda. Silence. That was when I realized she had no plan. No script. No lies left prepared. She wasn't expecting to be caught. Not like this. She thought it was contained, that I'd never know. She thought she was smarter than the risk. I never slept with him, she said again, barely above a whisper. That's not what I asked, I replied. I asked you his name. Another pause. I could see it all over her face. Her mind was racing, not with guilt, but strategy. Should she protect him? Should she minimize? Should she pivot? Pretend this was somehow my fault? I just don't think telling you that would help, she finally said. That's when the dam cracked. Not in me, but in the truth. It's not your job to decide what helps me, Linda, I said. You've already decided what helps you. You made decisions without me. You crossed lines without me. You shared things that belonged to us with a stranger. And now, when I asked a simple question, who is he, you go quiet. She looked down at her coffee. I didn't think it would get this far, she mumbled. I stood up, pushed my chair back slowly. You thought what, Linda? That I'd never notice. That I'd be so wrapped up in work and routine that I wouldn't recognize the difference in your eyes when you looked at me. She said nothing. Do you know how many times I've watched you lately? Just watched you on. Wondered if you were already gone. Wondered if the woman across the dinner table was still my wife, or just someone waiting to leave. Still, nothing. That silence, it was louder than any shouting match. Louder than slammed doors or broken glass. It was the silence of a decision. Mate, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't fighting for me. She was retreating. Quietly. Guiltlessly. Cowardly. You could have just said you were unhappy. I said, softer now. We could have gone to counseling. Taken time. Talked it through. But you didn't want to fix us, did you? You wanted more. You wanted him. Finally, she said, I don't know what I want. That was the last straw. Because after 3 decades of building a life, a family, a home, you should know. You should know if you want the man who stood by you through to miscarriages and your father's death. You should know if you still love the man who held your hand through every surgery, who mowed the lawn and fixed the leaky sink, and showed up every single day. But she didn't. And that told me everything. I walked out that morning, drove to the diner where I used to go with Ethan after his Little League games. I sat in the corner booth, ordered eggs over easy, and a black coffee, and stared out the window as the sun rose. The waitress, Bonnie, I think, asked if I was okay. I told her I'd had better mornings. She didn't press. She just topped off my cup and walked away. I stayed there 2 hours. When I got home, Linda had already left for work. No note, no call, nothing. That's when I packed a small bag and moved into the guest room. I installed a lock on the door that night. She didn't ask why, she knew. The silence between us became its own language one. I never learned to speak, but I didn't need to. I'd already heard everything I needed in what she didn't say. And yet, as cold and final as that felt, what happened next made me realize I hadn't seen anything yet. Because betrayal is one thing, but the way people try to cover it up, that's where things get ugly. And for me, it was about to get much worse. For most of our marriage, I thought our friends were our friends. We'd host game nights at the house. Linda would make her signature deviled eggs, and I'd be on grill duty. Her co-workers would bring over store-bought pies and cheap red wine, and we'd all pretend to enjoy Pictionary, even though someone always ended up yelling. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like community. We were all getting older, and these friendships, these shared meals, these casual jokes about aging knees and noisy grandkids seemed like anchors. They gave the illusion that everything was fine. But as things between Linda and me began to fall apart, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Those friendships were never ours. They were hers. I was just a fixture in the background, a chair filler, a prop husband who grilled the brats and made awkward small talk about fantasy football with people I had little in common with. After the photo, the silence, the refusal to speak his name, I decided to take a few days for myself. I checked into the Twin Pines Motor Lodge off Highway 2, nothing fancy, but it had clean sheets and silence. I told Linda I needed space. She didn't argue. That silence again. The second night I was there, around 7:15 p.m., my phone started blowing up, not from Linda, but from her friends. Cassie, Mark, Dana, all names I recognized. All people who'd been in our home, laughing over chili and cornbread, cradling Ethan when he was a baby. Their messages were all the same, in tone if not in words. You two need to sit down and talk this out. Linda's hurting too. Don't throw away 27 years over one mistake. Come to Cassie's on Sunday. We're having a little get-together to clear the air. I sat there in my motel room, staring at those texts, my fingers trembling not out of anger, but disbelief. Linda had already told them everything. Details I hadn't even processed yet. She had served up to her inner circle like cocktail shrimp. Our private wreckage was now a group discussion topic. I hadn't even had the chance to tell my side of the story. I wanted to scream. Instead, I replied to Cassie's invitation with a not at your house. We meet at Hickory's Steakhouse. Sunday, 6 p.m., private booth. She resisted at first, said it was too public, too impersonal. I insisted. I needed neutral ground, a place where I could walk away if things turned into a performance. When I arrived, they were already seated. 8 of them, Linda included. I noticed immediately, only one seat left, right next to her. She stood when she saw me. George, she said, hopeful. I didn't return the sentiment. I'd prefer the far end, away from Linda, I said evenly. If that's a problem, I'll dine elsewhere. Cassie forced a smile. Of course, George. Jared, would you mind? I sat. I didn't order. I didn't touch the water. I looked at each of them, people who'd laughed in my home, toasted at my table, and saw them clearly for the first time. You've all taken it upon yourselves to intervene in our marriage, I said. That's fine. I assume you care about Linda. But before we go further, let's establish something. I pulled a small envelope from my jacket and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of the photos. The ones of Linda and the man she still refused to name. This, I said, is what you're defending. And before you tell me about healing and understanding, I want an answer. I pointed to the man in the photo. Who is he? Silence. I looked at Cassie first. She looked away. Mark cleared his throat, opened his mouth, then closed it again. Dana took a sip of wine and stared down at her napkin. No one said a word. That silence, once again, told me everything. You're all protecting him, I said. So this isn't about helping us heal. It's about shielding your friend from the consequences of her choices. Cassie finally spoke. George, this was never supposed to hurt you. I laughed. Quiet, humorless. But it did. And what stings even more is realizing you all knew, or at least suspected long before I did. You watched it happen, and decided it wasn't your business to intervene then. But now you show up with speeches and group therapy. Still, no one denied it. No one admitted it, either. I stood up. I've lost my appetite. But I thank you for yours. Enjoy your steak. As I turned to leave, I heard Linda's voice. Behind me, Shaki. Small. George, wait. IDIDN, single quotes, T. No one else said a word. I walked out of Hickory's, and into the night air. Crisp and honest in a way no one at that table had been. I drove back to the motel, packed my bag, and headed home. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, but at WASN single quotes T. Inside, I found Ethan's toys scattered across the floor, evidence of the life I was still holding on to. I played with him that night, read him Goodnight Moon like I had 100 times before, tucked him in gently, kissed his forehead, and whispered that everything would be okay, even though I didn't yet know if that was true. Linda came home late. I was sitting in his room, watching Ethan sleep. She looked relieved when she saw me. "You're home." I didn't look at her, just waved her off. "Don't wake him." Later, she tried to speak, to hug, to soften. I didn't let her, and that's when I realized something even more painful than the betrayal. I was alone in a marriage surrounded by people I once thought were friends. But they weren't mine. They were hers. And soon I'd find out just how far they'd go to protect their circle, even if it meant turning my life inside out. And they had no idea. I wasn't done fighting yet. I had always assumed betrayal was personal, something done in the shadows, behind closed doors, between two people. But what I hadn't yet grasped was that sometimes betrayal doesn't come from one person. Sometimes it's coordinated. A group effort, a silent consensus built on self-interest, moral decay, and just enough rationalization to make it feel noble. That Sunday dinner at Hickory's had confirmed it. Linda wasn't alone in this. She had a system, a circle, a group of friends, and now, I suspected, something more than just friends protecting the man she'd chosen to desecrate our marriage bed with. And they had a plan. The following week, I moved back into the house, but not into the marriage. I claimed the guest room, changed the lock, and told Linda not to enter unless it involved our son. She didn't argue, but her eyes narrowed when she saw me install the deadbolt. That told me all I needed to know. She was recalculating. For days, there was quiet tension. Linda played the part. She made breakfast, folded laundry, even left me notes that mimicked the ones from our early years. "Hope today treats you well," scribbled on a napkin with a smiley face. It was theater. I wasn't buying a ticket then. Came Friday. I arrived home to find something off. There were shoes by the door. Too many voices, laughter, glasses, clinking. It was a scene dressed as casual, but beneath it, I felt a chill. Tracy, her best friend, opened the door before I could reach for the handle. She smiled too brightly. "George, you're just in time." "For what?" I asked, stepping inside. "Just a little dinner with friends," she said, leading me in. "We thought it was time to talk things out." I looked around. 8 faces. 2 I didn't recognize. One of them was him, the man from the photo. Mid-40s. Good hair. Smug posture. He stood as I entered, like he was about to greet me at a Rotary Club luncheon. Linda walked over, blocking my view. "George, please, before you get angry. We all just wanted to talk. To show you we're not the enemy." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. "This," she said, motioning toward him, "is Eric Franklin. And this," she gestured to the woman beside him, "is his wife, Marla. They've been helping us understand things better." I nodded slowly. "So, this is the guy, the one you wouldn't name, the one you kissed behind my back." Eric stepped forward, hand outstretched like we were meeting at a networking event. "Mr. Wallace, I know this is awkward, but I want you to know I respect you. I really do." I didn't take his hand. "First of all," I said calmly, "call me George. Mr. Wallace is reserved for men who haven't kissed my wife." The room froze. Eric chuckled nervously. "I understand. But please, I'm not here to cause pain. We believe in transparency. That's why Linda invited us. We thought maybe, once you heard everything, we could all move forward." I sat down, arms crossed. "I'm listening." That's when they launched it. Their full plan. Eric, with the confident tone of a cult leader, began. "We believe monogamy is outdated. We believe that true connection, lasting growth comes from freedom, from exploring, from trust in a deeper form. All of us here," he said, gesturing around the room, "have opened our marriages. And you know what happened? We got stronger, closer, more committed." I kept my face blank, but inside, I was boiling. "And Linda," he continued, "she didn't act out of lust, she acted out of love. She wanted to grow with you. You see, George, this isn't cheating, it's evolution." He said that word, evolutionist. If he were Moses holding the stone tablets, like I was the primitive, clinging to ideas carved in 1950s stone. I turned to Linda. "Did you talk to them before you talked to me?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I needed help understanding what I was feeling. I didn't want to scare you." "They helped me find the words." "You kissed him before you found the words," I said, voice cold. "And now you're dressing it up in flower shop language." She blinked. "I thought if I showed you how it could be if you saw it you'd understand. You'd want it to." "You mean?" I said. You thought if you ambushed me in my own home, with your friends and your lover and his wife, I'd be so cornered I'd surrender. Silence. That was their plan all along. Overwhelm. Normalize. Rebrand betrayal as connection. They didn't just want me to accept it. They wanted me to thank them for showing me the light. But I wasn't buying it. I need to use the bathroom, I said, standing. I walked upstairs, shut the door, and took a deep breath. Then I reached into my shirt pocket and stopped the voice recorder on my phone. I had captured the whole thing, every word. When I returned, I smiled a fake, polite smile that said, "Play along for now." Linda looked relieved. "George," she said, "please, let's just finish dinner. We can talk more afterward." "Sure," I replied, settling into my seat. "Let's finish." That night, after the guests left, I checked the spare bedroom's lock again. I moved the recording file to my cloud drive, backed it up twice, because now I knew this wasn't about marriage. This was about control, about power, about dragging me into a game I never agreed to play. And if they were going to turn my life into a board game, I was done playing the pawn that they had a plan. But so did I. And next time they gathered, they wouldn't be the ones holding all the cards. 3 days after the dinner ambush, I came home to find Linda humming in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove like she hadn't just detonated a grenade in our living room days earlier. She turned and smiled when she saw me, like we were picking up from a commercial break, like everything in between the kiss, the lies, the group intervention had been swept neatly under the rug. "Ethan's in the den watching cartoons," she said cheerfully. "I made beef stew, your favorite." I said nothing, just nodded and walked upstairs. She followed me. "George," she said, her voice soft, rehearsed, "I know the other night didn't go how you expected. But you saw what I've seen, that this doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something better." I turned to face her. "You ambushed me in my own house. You let that man sit on my couch. You let him speak to me like I was the one who needed fixing." She looked wounded. "They just wanted to help." "No," I replied. "They wanted me to submit. There's a difference." She started to cry, softly at first. Then she pulled something from her back pocket, divorce papers. "I didn't want to do this," she said. "But maybe, if this is what you want." It wasn't the divorce papers that shocked me. It was the timing. I hadn't filed anything yet, but she had. She beat me to it. Not out of regret, not even out of pain, but strategy. I looked her in the eyes. "You had these ready." She didn't answer. That night, after she went to bed, I called my old friend Dave Sanders. He'd been in law enforcement before retiring to Arizona, but he still knew people, PIs, attorneys, real guys. I told him everything. By the next morning, he had connected me with a local private investigator named Ron Meeks, ex-state trooper, quiet, methodical, the kind of man who knows how to listen without blinking. I met Ron at a diner in Sandpoint, handed him a list, addresses, dates, phone numbers. I gave him what I had, the recordings, the messages, the photos, and I said, "I need evidence, not to humiliate her, but to protect my son and myself." He nodded once. "You're not the first." Over the next 2 weeks, Ron built a case. What he uncovered didn't surprise me, but it still hit hard. Eric Franklin wasn't just Linda's friend. He had been involved with multiple women from their group. The so-called open marriage crowd wasn't just experimenting with modern love. They were covering each other's tracks. There were texts, video clips, hotel receipts, and more damning than all of it's one audio file. It was a conversation between Linda and Cassie, recorded by Ron with legal clearance. I heard her voice as clearly as if she were in the room with me. "I need something that'll tip the court," Linda said. Cassie, "Like what?" Linda, "He won't agree to joint custody. He wants full. If I say he got physical, that might change things." Cassie paused. "Are you sure you want to go there?" Linda, "He's never hit me. But who's going to know?" My blood froze. She wasn't just walking away from the marriage. She was trying to destroy me. The next day, I met with attorney Deborah Kenrick, mentored by Ron. She was sharp, direct, and seasoned. After reviewing the files, she looked up from her folder and said, "You're lucky. Most men don't see this coming until it's too late." She filed on my behalf immediately. 2 days later, Linda was served at work. I asked Deborah to do it that way intentionally. Not out of pettiness, but so she'd know what it felt like to be exposed, to have her illusion of control shattered in public. That night, she came home like a hurricane. "You served me at the office," she hissed, in front of my boss. What the hell is wrong with you? I stayed calm. Just giving you the transparency you're so fond of. She paced, furious. You're divorcing me. You said you wanted space. We could have worked it out. You were planning to accuse me of abuse, Linda. She stopped cold. What? I heard the conversation, I said. With Cassie, I know everything. And my lawyer knows too. Her face went pale. That's illegal. You can't. It's not illegal, I interrupted. Ron Meeks recorded it. All by the book. She stared at me like I'd just stabbed her. But the truth was, I hadn't even raised my voice. I didn't need to. Her own words did the damage. I never laid a hand on you, I said quietly. But you would have let a judge think otherwise. You were willing to destroy my reputation, my career, my time with Ethan. Also, you could win a game I never wanted to play. She opened her mouth, closed it. And that was the first moment since all this began that she looked ashamed. But it was too late. There's something final about knowing someone would throw you under a bus if it meant winning custody or keeping their secrets intact. It changes how you see their face, their hands, even their voice. The woman I married died the moment she decided to weaponize the truth. I didn't hit her, but she stabbed me in the back with precision and a smile. And as the custody battle loomed, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just fighting for freedom anymore. I was fighting for survival. The courthouse in Pendleton wasn't much to look at. Tread brick. 2 stories, a parking lot with faded lines, and a soda machine that hadn't worked since 2009. But that morning, as I sat on the worn wooden bench outside courtroom B, it might as well have been the Supreme Court. My hands were steady, but my gut churned like I'd swallowed gravel. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, injustice clenching its fists. Inside, Linda was preparing her testimony. I imagined her lawyer coaching her. You're the mother. Show emotion. Lean into the betrayal. Remind the judge you tried to save the marriage. What? They didn't know what no one in that room knew yet, was that I hadn't come unarmed. Deborah, my attorney, sat beside me. She was calm, flipping through her leather binder like she'd done this 1,000 times. And she had. Divorce was her business. But justice was her sport. When the bailiff called our case, Wallace v. Wallace, I stood up, straightened my tie, and followed Deborah into the courtroom. Linda was already seated, her hands folded in her lap, a sad expression painted on her face like a carefully chosen outfit. She looked fragile, deliberate, and rehearsed. Her lawyer, some young man with a 3-piece suit and a clipboard, stood and launched into his opening. Mrs. Wallace, he said solemnly, tried to preserve this marriage. She sought compromise, counseling, communication. She offered reconciliation. What she received in return was stonewalling, isolation, and emotional cruelty, and eventually, physical aggression. I felt the air leave the room. He continued. We will demonstrate that Mr. Wallace was not only unwilling to address the marital strain, but created an environment so hostile that Mrs. Wallace feared for her safety. She seeks primary custody of their child, alimony, and a protective order to ensure her security during and after these proceedings. It was theater, but I wasn't the audience. When it was her turn to speak, Linda stepped into the witness box. Like a woman walking into church, she dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She talked about our son, about the decay of connection, about me becoming cold and distant. Then she lowered her voice and, with a trembling chin, spoke the line they'd rehearsed. I was scared of George. He raised his voice. He slammed doors. I felt trapped. One night, I thought he might hit me. I locked myself in the bathroom. The judge, a woman in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much, leaned forward. And, did he strike you, Mrs. Wallace? Linda hesitated. No, she said. But, I felt the threat was there. Her lawyer smiled. That pause had been deliberate. When Deborah rose, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply asked one question. Mrs. Wallace, do you recall a phone call you made to Cassandra Rhodes on March 14th of this year? Linda blinked. I speak to Cassie often. I don't recall every call. Deborah turned to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to admit into evidence an audio recording, obtained legally with consent from the secondary party. The judge raised her eyebrows. Continue. Deborah played the file, and there it was. Linda's voice, as clear as if she were standing beside us. He's never hit me, but who's going to know? If I say he got physical, it'll shift the case. I need that leverage. The courtroom was dead silent. Linda turned pale. Her lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a tack. The judge nodded. Let the record reflect. This recording directly contradicts the plaintiff's sworn testimony. Deborah stood straighter. Your Honor, we also have a licensed private investigator's affidavit, confirming ongoing surveillance conducted, within legal bounds. Included are timestamps, logs, and photographic evidence, contradicting the plaintiff's account of events including allegations of isolation, verbal abuse, and emotional neglect. She handed the documents to the clerk. Judge looked at Linda. Mrs. Wallace, did you fabricate your allegations to gain custody of your child? Linda opened her mouth, closed it. Tears welled up again, but this time, they were real. And they weren't about loss. They were about exposure. Yes, she whispered. The judge sat back in her chair. Perjury in a family court is a serious offense. Manipulating the system to alienate a parent from their child is contemptible. This court does not look kindly on such actions. The gavel hadn't dropped yet, but I already felt lighter. Not vindictive, not smug, just relieved. The truth had finally stood up and spoken for itself. 10 minutes later, the judgment came down. I was granted primary custody of Etham. Visitation, for Lindy supervised at first, was left to my discretion. Alimony was reduced to a minimal amount, just enough to cover her basic expenses until she found employment. The protective order was denied, and the judge warned her attorney that future false claims could result in criminal prosecution. Linda didn't look at me, not when the bailiff called the next case, not when the gavel echoed, not when I rose and walked past her on my way out. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright, absently bright for a day that had felt so dark for so long. I stood on the steps, closed my eyes, and took the deepest breath I'd taken in months. Deborah walked up beside me. You did well in there. I didn't say a word, I replied. She smiled. Sometimes silence speaks loudest when the truth is loud enough. And she was right. Justice had taken its time. It had wandered, tripped over misdirection, and almost lost its way. But in the end, it arrived. And it saw everything clearly. After the court ruling, Linda moved out within a week. She took only what the decree allowed: her clothes, her personal effects, a few kitchen items she insisted she couldn't live without. The house suddenly felt like a museum of absence. Her perfume no longer lingered in the hallway. Her garden gloves were gone from the shed. And yet, the silence she left behind was different this time. It wasn't tense. It was clean. Ethan asked about her the first few days. I answered as gently and honestly as I could. Mummy needs time. Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, but they're still our family. She'll always be your mum. I didn't color the truth, but I didn't weaponize it either. I refused to let her mistakes define his childhood. He deserved better. And the truth was, so did I. But just because the divorce was finalized, didn't mean the damage was done. Echoing. The aftershocks kept coming, not from Linda, but from the people who had stood so firmly behind her. The so-called friends who had sipped wine in my living room while hiding secrets. The ones who had looked me in the eye and called me brother, all while watching my back burn. Cassie, Mark, Dana, the whole inner circle that once called themselves our family choice vanished. No checking calls, no apologies, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook message. Silence. But then, as the dust settled and people stopped pretending not to see me at the grocery store, whispers started drifting back. Eric Franklin, the group's smooth-talking philosopher king, was no longer showing up to the neighborhood dinners. His wife Marla had filed her own separation papers just weeks after our case ended. Rumor was, she'd discovered Eric's freedom to explore extended far beyond the circle. He wasn't building trust. He was collecting trophies. Marla had been the last to see it, but once she did, she burned every bridge on her way out. Cassie, the ringleader of Linda's intervention dinner, was fired from her HR job after an internal complaint surfaced. It seemed one of her own coworkers had brought up the group's activities, specifically how they used corporate events to scout new recruits. The company launched a quiet investigation. The report never went public, but she was gone by the end of the quarter. Mark and Dana, the smug couple who once said monogamy is a fear response, filed for bankruptcy after Dana drained their joint account, chasing some ill-fated business venture, something involving boutique essential oils, and a spiritual awakening retreat in Montana. It never opened. It was like watching a perfect row of dominoes fall, slow, precise, inevitable. At first I felt vindicated, but the more I saw their lives unravel, the more I realized it wasn't justice I was witnessing. It was the fallout of bad choices. Because betrayal doesn't just cost you a marriage, it costs you credibility. The world doesn't give you a certificate for being morally modern. It watches how you treat people when no one's clapping. And when you trade loyalty for novelty, When you sacrifice trust for thrill, you always pay more than you bargained for. Linda tried reaching out a few times after the hearing. A message here, a voicemail there. I didn't block high, didn't need to. She wasn't threatening anymore. Just hollow. In one message, she said she missed Ethan's laugh. In another, she said she was still healing. And once she said something that almost sounded like remorse. I thought I was chasing freedom, but I think I just wanted to feel something again. I didn't realize what I'd lose trying to find it. She didn't ask to come back. She knew better, but she lingered around the edges of our life like a woman who'd stepped out into the snow without realizing how far from the fire she'd wandered. I allowed visitation. Supervised, at first. Slowly, we moved toward a workable schedule. Ethan still smiled when he saw her, and I let that be enough. He didn't need to know everything. Not yet. Maybe one day he'll ask why it all fell apart. And when that day comes, I'll tell him the truth. That his mom got lost chasing something she thought was happiness. That she trusted the wrong people. That she made choices that broke her family. But also that she's still his mother. And that real love doesn't have to mean forgetting. But it does mean forgiving when you're ready. And I'm getting there. Not because Linda deserves it, but because Ethan does. And I'll be damned if I let my bitterness define the kind of father I promised I'd be. So I carry on. I make breakfast. I drive him to school. I laugh with him at old Andy Griffith reruns, even when I'm exhausted. Because I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who didn't run. And now, in the rearview mirror, all I see are old friends, old lies, and old choices disappearing down the road. Behind mirror seating, into a past I survived. And up ahead, a quiet road, a clean start, and a little boy who still thinks I'm the hero of the story. There's a moment, after the dust settles, when the anger fades not all at once. Not cleanly, but it thins out, like fog lifting over a cold lake. What's left behind isn't forgiveness. It's clarity. That's where I found myself on a Saturday morning, folding laundry, while Ethan sat on the living room floor building a Lego fire station. The sun poured through the window, catching the blonde streaks in his hair. Linda's hair. Same crooked smile too. I saw her in him every day, whether I wanted to or not. She wasn't mine anymore. That chapter was over. She'd written her own ending without me. But she would always be something more important than my ex-wife. She was the mother of my son. And no matter how much pain she caused, no matter how selfish, how reckless, how cruel, nothing changed that fact. Ethan didn't need a war. He needed a childhood. I still remember the first supervised visit. We met at a local community center that rented rooms for co-parenting arrangements. Neutral ground, bright lighting, quiet staff. Linda showed up early, holding a bag of Ethan's favorite snacks, cheddar bunnies, apple juice, and that one blue Hot Wheels car she had somehow tracked down online. She looked like a woman trying to smile through a hangover made of regret. Not drunk, just heavy, hollow in the eyes. Ethan ran to her, arms wide, shouting, "Mommy." She knelt down and hugged him tight, burying her face in his little shoulder. For a moment, I saw the old Linda, the woman who used to sing lullabies off-key and sneak chocolate chips into pancake batter, just to see Ethan's face light up. I watched from a corner chair, unread paperback in hand, pretending not to listen. She didn't cry, not that day. She just sat cross-legged on the floor with him, asking about school, about the dog next door, about whether the Lego fire truck had a ladder. It was simple, and for Ethan, that was enough. She wasn't perfect, far from it, but she showed up. On time, sober, focused. And over time, the visits became routine. I wasn't warm toward her. I didn't need to be, but I was civil. Because when a child walks into a room and sees two parents, what they remember isn't what was said, it's what they felt. And I never wanted Ethan to feel like he had to choose between loving her and respecting me. He deserved better than that. So I swallowed the bitter moments. The late pickups. The sighs when she tried too hard to be fun mom with bribes and gadgets. I let him enjoy those Saturdays, even when I hated seeing him leave. Because I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting him. There were moments, though, that made it hard. Like the first time Ethan asked if we'd ever be a family again. We were in the backyard, grilling burgers. He was holding a plastic spatula, helping. He looked up and said, "Why don't you and Mummy live together anymore?" I took a long breath, bent down to his level, and said, "Sometimes, two people love each other for a long time, but they forget how to be kind. And when kindness leaves a house, it's not a good place for a little boy to grow up." He nodded slowly, like it made sense in the way only Kids can accept life's hardest truths. But Mummy still loves you. And I do too. And that will never change. That was enough for him. And that became my compass. Every decision, every boundary, every uncomfortable exchange, I asked myself one question. What will Ethan remember? Will he remember a father who dragged his mother through the mud, or one who stood tall and gave him peace? Because no matter what Linda had done to me, she was still his mom. And that was sacred. Years from now, when he's grown and sorting through the puzzle of his childhood, I want him to say, my dad protected me. My mom showed up. They didn't love each other, but they both loved me. That's the best we could offer him. Linda. And I don't talk much beyond logistics now. Pickup times, school plays, doctor appointments. But there's no venom, no court orders between us. Just silence shaped by respect and hard lessons. I'll never forget what she did. I'll never trust her again. But I don't need to. Because she's no longer my partner. She's just Ethan's mother. And that title still matters. Forgiveness didn't come to me like a sunrise. There was no one moment where the clouds parted, and I suddenly felt free. It came the way a tree grows back after being struck by lightning, slow, crooked, scarred, but still standing. People say, forgiveness is a choice. Maybe for some, it is. Maybe it's easier when the betrayal is small missed birthdays, angry words, a broken promise that can be glued back together. But when someone tears your life apart, not with one act, but with a series of decisions, forgiveness isn't a decision. It's a process, a road you walk, not always willingly. For a long time, I didn't want to walk it at all. In the months after the divorce, I carried bitterness like a pocket knife, small, sharp, always close. I wasn't angry all the time, but I was ready to be. I had lines rehearsed for arguments that never happened. I imagined running into her friends at the grocery store, throwing their hypocrisy back in their faces. I pictured Linda coming back, asking for another chance, just so I could slam the door in some dramatic declaration of self-worth. None of that ever happened. What did happen were smaller things, quieter things, like Ethan asking if I still loved his mum, like finding an old anniversary card tucked inside a photo album, her handwriting as familiar as my own, like waking up one morning and realizing I hadn't thought about the betrayal at all the day before. Little cracks in the wall I'd built around my heart. The truth is, holding on to that rage was exhausting. It didn't give me strength, it gave me weight. And I was tired of carrying it. So I started small. I stopped rereading the court transcripts. I deleted the last voicemail she left that I kept playing just to stay angry. I let go of the idea that one day she'd apologize exactly the way I wanted, with the exact words I deserved. That's when the healing began, not in the headlines of my life, but in the footnotes. I forgave her not because she earned it, but because I earned peace. I needed to stop being the man who was wronged, and start being the man who could move on. It didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean welcoming her back into my heart or trusting her with anything more than a school pickup schedule. It meant letting go of the need to punish her every time I saw her name on my phone. It meant smiling politely when we crossed paths at Ethan's school play, and sitting 2 rows apart, without bitterness in my stomach. It meant freeing myself, and slowly, that forgiveness spilled into other parts of my life. I reconnected with old friends, people who weren't caught in the storm. I started fishing again. I hosted a barbecue. I laughed, really laughed, over a cup of coffee with a coworker one Tuesday morning. And I realized I hadn't done that in years without faking it. One night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, the cicadas humming like they always had. And I thought, this is my life now. Not the life I planned, not the one I was promised, but a good one. Linda and I had shared nearly 30 years, and while the ending was brutal, not all of it was a lie. There were real memories, real laughter, real love once. She broke something sacred, but I refused to let that be the only thing. I remember, forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about making peace with her. It's about making peace with my story. Accepting that this is how it happened, that I walked through hell and came out better. And maybe that's the only revenge I ever needed. Not her regret, not her apology, just me, standing tall, raising our son, and building a life from the wreckage, not in spite of it, but because I chose to keep going. So if you're watching this, and your heart is cracked open, if you're holding on to anger like it's the last part of you that still feels alive, know this: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering without bleeding. And one day, you'll look back, like I did, and realize the most powerful thing you ever did was choose to let it go.